torrential downpours in northeastern Ghana have left 20 people dead.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to this edition of the program. Thank you very much for your time. This is Good Evening Ghana, and we are live here on Metro TV. Also live on Facebook to our listeners abroad and to the global world. And we are also live on YouTube. Tonight, we have three important matters for your concern. The first one is what we have already showed you. It's the Accra flooding situation, and we have received a firm commitment from the Minister of Works and Housing to attend our program on Thursday. But also, we'll be talking about PDS. That's quite a vexed issue that you have heard over and over again. Yesterday, Joy FM published an interview in which the American Director of Corporate Affairs of the Embassy spoke to Kojo Yankson. We will show you back portions of that interview. Quite an interesting and well-conducted interview, I should say. It's very, very well done. We will show you portions of that interview and also try to understand where the Americans are coming from. And then we will tell you the full story of PDS, showing you some of the never-seen emails that have been exchanged between high-ranking officials of the government of Ghana and officials of Alkut, the insurance company in the center of the whole brouhaha. We'll show you those emails and also tell you the full story, and then you can make your decision on why the Americans are angry. So fundamentally, the PDS issue is that the Americans are unhappy that the Ghanaian part of the ECG concession took a decision that was not in the interest of either the concession or did not have any basis for the decision to be taken. The Ghanaians are saying that the decision was taken based on hardcore evidence of factual misrepresentation that went to the core of the contract, and that affected the contract itself. And so that also gave them the right within the terms of agreement to terminate the contract. For the termination, it's cost Ghana some money, and it may cost Ghana also some aspects of excellent relationship with Americans. initially, the Americans have announced that there will be a withdrawal of some 190 million cedis that would have been applied for the energy sector and would have been applied to support aspects of the energy sector. It looks also like the Americans will be unhappy with this matter, and so they will take other decisions. Well, is it a neo-colonial strategy or is it a contractual arm twisting? That's what we'll be finding out tonight when we get to the PDS issues. But, after many weeks and many months of juggling about football, last week Friday here in Accra, this happened.
To announce that I'm not interested in contesting this second round in Minnesota.
Like I've always been preaching, football is one big family. There are no losers, there are no winners. Like I said in the beginning of this campaign, we sat here, some of you came here as early as 8 o'clock. As at now, it's about 15 minutes past 3. We have the opportunity to go another third round. But like I said, I'm a unifier, I'm a team player, and I work for football. In the interest of football, I concede defeat, and I congratulate my brother, Adom-Otchere, as the winner.
All 93 votes, which translates to 96.9%. So, we therefore declare Mr. Ken E.S. Ogrebu as elected president of
holding the office of the President of the Ghana Football Association,
holding the office of the President of the Ghana Football Association,
do in the name of the Almighty God.
Do in the name of the Almighty God.
Swear that I will not.
Swear that I will not.
Directly or indirectly.
Directly or indirectly.
Communicate or reveal.
Communicate or reveal.
To any person, any matter.
To any person and any matter.
Which shall be brought.
Which shall be brought.
Under my consideration.
Tonight, two important sports personalities will join us in the studio. Ibrahim Sani Dara, formerly of the BBC Sports, covered most of the international sports events relating to Africa and in particular football, and later on became the spokesperson of the Ghana Football Association. He has already announced that he has no interest in becoming General Secretary of the Football Association because, as he put Association will not be able to adequately compensate him. Ibrahim Sani is our guest in the studio. He knows a lot about what happened before number 12 and what has happened after number 12. He'll be talking to us about the theme of our football discussion tonight is that what role did politics, and I mean NDC and MPP politics, what role did politics play in the GFA elections? Has the NDC won the GFA elections or has the MPP won? Well, we can talk about that, can't we? Also, we want to find out from Ibrahim Sani's perspective whether there was any influence of Kwesi Nyantakyi in the room, and going forward in the new GFA, whether there will still be an overbearing influence of the former eternal president of the GFA, Mr. Kwesi Nyantakyi, who is currently resting quietly away from football. Siddiq Adams, an avowed sports journalist, will also join us for that segment of the program. That's our main discussion for tonight. Ibrahim Sani Dara and Siddiq Adams will answer the controversial questions about the ramifications of the GFA election, which occurred last Friday. This is Good Evening Ghana, and it's live. So now we are set to roll. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll begin with Accra Floods, with a big announcement about Minister Adom-Otchere and Good Evening Ghana, and then we'll get into the PDS issues before we talk about football. We'll be right back. Tell your friend to tell his friend. The controversial program is up live on Metro TV.
It's been a year of God's continuous goodness, peace, and thank you together at this year's MTN Stands in Worship as we are led into God's by Selena Boateng, Kwesi Oteng, Sissy Chum, Joe Metal, Adom-Otchere, Akese Brimpong, Koda, Diana Hamilton,
Daughters of Glorious Jesus,
and from Nigeria, Prosper Ochimana, the Akuame Hitmaker, happening on Saturday, 2nd of November at the Fantasy Dome Trade Fair, La, 4 p.m. sharp. Dial *713*6# to purchase your tickets at 20 Ghana Cedis and 50 Ghana Cedis. All proceeds will be donated to charity. So, join us, say thank you to God for His goodness. And to set your favorite artist's song as your caller tune, just dial *1355# to download at only 26 pesos for 60 days.
Everywhere you go.
We are approaching the rainy season. Don't you think it's time to distill your choke gutter?
Oh, why? That is where we pour our rubbish.
Oh, how? Why do you dump garbage in the gutter when there are dustbins for that? These gutters are meant to carry runoff water away from here. Dumping your rubbish here will get them choked, leading to blocking of the water path, spillage, and flooding.
Oh, don't worry. Nothing will happen.
Indeed. And speaking of rain, I think it's about time we get going. See you.
Yeah, see you.
Hey! Somebody help me! Oh! See what my choke gutters have done to me! Hey, Radie! Somebody help me! Oh!
Dumping rubbish into gutters can cause flooding. Stop it. Use the dustbins for your waste and garbage.
Okay, welcome back to the show, and thank you very much for joining us. We are now going to begin our program tonight. As I said, joining us later tonight, we'll be talking to Ibrahim Sanija, a former spokesperson of the Ghana Football Association, and also Sadiq Adams, who will join us to answer controversial questions about the ramifications of the GFA election. Were there political interventions, and then Mr. Kwesi Nyantakyi actually have a role to play at all? That's what we'll be talking about in a minute. Now, though, yesterday in Accra, we were all quite disappointed that what appeared to be small rain, but it rained for a long time, brought out reports of terrifying scenes in parts of Accra, especially the Spintex Road area towards Committee 18 and Committee 20, and also towards the motorway area. All of these scenes were completely terrifying and actually embarrassing to all of us Ghanaians, because we felt that in the 21st century, our lives should not be disrupted so significantly by a rainfall. Some people who lived in Tema or who live in Tema were unable to go to their homes yesterday, and they had to sleep in Accra. And those who live in Accra who work in Tema were also unable to access the motorway for a good measure of maybe 10 hours. The motorway was not accessible to many people. Our cameras have captured videos that have been shot by ordinary people, and we put together this just so that we can reflect. And after that, I'll tell you what we are doing with the Minister for Works on Thursday about this matter. And then we'll come back to the studio and continue with the rest of the program. It was a very uncomfortable night for all of us Ghanaians.
Torrential downpours as one have left 28 people dead.
So that was Accra yesterday, and apparently 11 children died in Kumasi, the Ashanti regional capital, as a result of flooding as well. It was dastardly, it's bad. And on Thursday, the Minister for Works and Housing, the Honorable Adom-Otchere, who is also a member for Accra South, will join us in the studio to give us explanations as to where we are. Of course, I know that you are saying that we hear these explanations every day. We do hear them every day, but Adom-Otchere has something particularly special to say, because today the minority in Parliament held a press conference in which they accused the Honourable Minister for Finance and Economic Planning, the Honourable Adom-Otchere, of holding the money that will be applied for the works that should settle the flooding matter. The minority accused Adom-Otchere of that matter. We'll find out on Thursday when Adom-Otchere comes whether or not it's true that monies that are meant for these matters, to resolve these matters and to make Ghana befit a 21st century city, to make Accra befit a 21st century city, are being withheld by the Honourable Minister for Finance, the Honourable Adom-Otchere. So that's a Thursday date with the Honourable Minister for Works and Housing, the learned Adom-Otchere, Member of Parliament for Abu North. Okay, but as we looked around social media today, there was a concern that perhaps Accra's situation is bad, and it indicates that we are not ready for the 21st century. But the others say that climate change may be partly responsible for these kinds of flooding that we experience. But of course, we know that construction of drainage and all of that, and building in waterways, and terrible and unacceptable sanitation behavior all account for these flooding that we see around. However, this was London today. This is the city of London, the capital of the United Kingdom, and this is a street, and you can see flooding. There you go. That's London. That's London. You can see the vehicles. You should have kept that photograph, the one before this one, so we talk about it. This is actually London, the capital of the United Kingdom, the home of Queen Elizabeth, and this what happened in London. So you see the vehicles, and you see the water. The water level is almost, and people in those vehicles will be imperiled one way or the other. Hopefully they didn't die, but they will be under severe pressure. This is on the streets in London. Let's go on to the other photographs, and we'll see. We are not comparing London to Ghana in any way, as some of our Facebookers suggested when we put up the promo. But we are saying that when the minister comes, we have to ask him the role that climate change is playing in our situation, and the role that our own poor drainages are playing. This is London. This is London getting flooded. There you see the cyclist in there. His entire bicycle has been engulfed by water. And this is London just yesterday or today, I think. This is London. This is the streets of London, where bus 149, some of you who know London will know where it goes. Bus 149 is on his way somewhere, and it's been engulfed around the Thai area with water on the streets in a city that we would have thought was excellent and well prepared for all of these difficulties. There they will say it's climate change, but perhaps here it is something else. So that's just our comment on what's happened in London. Nothing to justify anything. If you're interested in this matter, if you are a civil engineer or you are a student engineer, on Thursday, don't miss our interview with the learned Adom-Otchere, who is going to walk us through all of these processes. And he'll take all the controversial questions from us. If you do have controversial and difficult questions to ask him, you can send it to our Facebook, Evening Ghana Official. Now we get to our second matter, because we are hurrying to talk about football. Something has been going on over the last 13 weeks, and it's about the Power Distribution Services Company, PDS. Started with the information that there were some boardroom issues between PDS and the Electricity Company of Ghana. Now, the Electricity Company of Ghana is a concessionaire, and the PDS is a concessionaire. That means the ECG have given their equipment as a concession, if you like a lease, if you like rent, but it's a lease, to the PDS to operate it and run it for 25 years or so, and return it to ECG. Why did we have to do that? We had to do that because some time ago, the American president, George Bush, decided that he was going to be kind to Africa, whatever that means. Being kind to Africa meant that he was going to select some African countries who have practiced democracy, good governance to satisfactory levels. And he was going to dole out monies to these countries, and those monies were going to be specifically used for the purpose of infrastructure by the Americans. generally all over the world, that the infrastructure deficit around the world is highest in Africa. So the American President George Bush, who decided to be kind to Africa, decided that he was going to give money to these African countries that show good governance, and that money was going to be used for infrastructure. They call it Compact 1, infrastructural development. So here in Ghana, the money was applied to the development of the N1 road, and we call it N1, some call it George Bush Highway, etc. But it's a road that runs across the city from the south, runs across the city on the south coast. So it runs from the Abeka La Paz area all the way towards Cape Coast, and it provides a free ride from the eastern part of Accra to the western part of Accra. It was called the N1. It's been developed. 500 million United States dollars was applied for that. The American government decided that they will continue with this, whether it was a Democratic Party or a Republican Party. So after President Bush left office, Barack Obama became president, and he decided to continue with Compact 2. In Compact 2, they identified that Africa had energy difficulties. They also identified, and these are Americans, they also identified that the energy difficulties that Africa had They identified that the energy difficulties that Africa had was to be located and found in the power distribution of African countries. So in Ghana, for instance, they observed that the ECG power distribution system was plagued. It was plagued by many difficulties and many challenges. And those challenges resulted in excessive cost of power, and they also resulted in sufficient wastage of power. And so they decided that power distribution in Africa under Compact 2 should be privatized. The experience that they observed in Africa was that when things are privatized, they work better. Perhaps that's experienced in almost the whole world. And so they decided that this power distribution must be privatized. Companies should be set up to take the concession from ECG and do the distribution and the collection for ECG so that it will be more effective and efficient. It was determined that if this was done, coupled with the retooling of energy infrastructure in most of African countries, Obama's Power Africa will happen. And with Power Africa will come new industries, etc., etc. So this is where the conversation comes from. Compact 2 under Barack Obama. So as far as Ghana is concerned, our sort of association with Compact 2 was that ECG be privatized, okay? So not ECG be privatized as such, but actually the distribution services under ECG be privatized. So that's what happened. So contracts were done under the NDC John Mahama administration. The MPP inherited it, and tender had been done, and then people had been selected. And so when the MPP inherited it, what the MPP did, which was good for Ghana, is that it moved the private sector participation from 25% to 51%. That's what the MPP achieved. And so the 51% concessionaire was going to be a local partner. It moved the local participation from 25 to 51%. So enter PDS, the local partner, 51% granted to them. They take over the concession and they are supposed to work. And all of this is happening under an agreement which includes the MIDA, which is representing the MCC, because I'm not explaining these terms because I know that those who are sufficiently acquainted to this, clearly understand it. So MIDA is the Millennium Development Corporation. They are looking after the Compact 1, Compact 2. They are called MIDA. The MCC is the American institution that is managing it globally around the world. So every country has a desk or a representative who is representing the MCC. And then there's MIDA, which is put together by the country people. And then there's the government of Ghana, and then there's a concessionaire. So all of these were put together and it started. Now they were put together under some agreements where the concessionaire was obliged to do certain things. And the government of Ghana was also obliged to do certain things. So rights, responsibilities, and duties were clearly established under this contract. Okay. So this contract was running until we heard that a certain obligation that was due from the concessionaires, being the PDS, had not been achieved. Information was that there had been some fraudulent misrepresentation of something from an insurance company. So what is this obligation? This obligation is for PDS to show that having taken over the ECG equipment, if for some reason they are not able to deliver the ECG equipment back to ECG at the time they have to deliver it under a contract of 20 or 25 years, they will be able to pay for it if for some reason the equipment is damaged one way or the other, because they are taking over some of ECG's equipment that are related to power distribution. So the whole insurance agreement was about the fact that if they are not able to hold the equipment and deliver it as it is, then they will pay some money. To do that, they had to show whether they had money to pay. Okay, so they had to get a guarantee, as they call it, a bank guarantee, as they call it. Okay, that was changed from bank guarantee to an insurance guarantee. It means they required an insurance company to say that here is money, we are committed to doing this, and so if PDS damage your equipment, we think they won't damage it, but if they damage it for some to make ECG comfortable that they were not going to lose in this concessionary agreement. Okay, so the PDS were supposed to provide that through this Al-Quds company. It was found that Al-Quds was not the company, the Al-Quds that was represented to ECG as the company doing the insurance guarantee said they didn't know anything about it. They said one of their own officers had connived with a guy called Adom-Otchere. And tonight we'll show you some emails. First seen here on Good Evening Ghana, but I'm sure you may have heard other people talk about it on Radio Kwekubaku in particular has been talking about it. We'll show you the emails tonight here, and you see it for the first time. Okay, so there was all of that confusion. Ghanaians were confused about what was happening. The opposition blamed the government. They said it's the biggest corruption scandal of the century. They hanged it on the neck of the president and the vice president. All sorts of confusion. So next in line of the events that occurred was that the government people traveled to Qatar, where Al-Quds is based, and engaged with them, the Attorney General, the Honorable Godfrey Dame, the Minister for Interior, the Honorable Ambrose Derry, some senior police officers traveled to Qatar to find out what was happening. And they went to Qatar and found out what was happening. They were told that Al-Quds itself as a company is actually unable to deliver that level of insurance guarantee. And so any insurance guarantee that says they were delivering that amount of money had to be fraudulent because their company was not as big to be able to deliver that. There was a company in the middle called Australia, which is the agent arranging the money, etc., etc. All okay. So all of this confusion continues. And then we hear that the government of Ghana intends to terminate. We were told that the people who hold the concession were friends and family of the president. And so it was an inside job for the president, his friends and his family to sort of cook some corruption deal and make a lot of money on the back of the sweat of Ghanaians. All of these things came through. So there was so much information in the air. People were not sure what to believe. But all we knew is that there was some problem between ECG and between PDS. Okay. So the Ghanaians indicated that they intended to terminate the contract. Okay, that's where the problem started in the boardroom. They met the Americans said something, the Ghanaians said something. Eventually, we saw the very bizarre situation where the government of Ghana takes a decision in the fight against corruption, as it turned out, as the government of Ghana would want us to believe, as the information minister told us, that this is being done in the expression of anti-corruption tenets of President Akufo-Addo to terminate a contract that had been tainted one way or the other, and also to terminate the contract based on the contract itself and to apply the clauses in the contract where if people had not discharged their obligations one way or the other, termination was certainly an option within the context of the contract. Somehow, the Americans are not happy with that. It's shocking if you want to believe the government of Ghana. It's shocking. Americans will be unhappy with something like that. Okay, the Americans were not just unhappy. They wrote letters to show that they are not happy. And they also eventually granted an interview. The American government and the American embassy doesn't do that often. This time, they granted an interview. It indicates that the Americans were terribly unhappy with this. Granting an interview after the Minister of Finance had published a letter, after the information minister had granted an interview, means that they wanted the Ghanaian people to know the other side of the story. And the other side of the story from the American lenses was against the government. But why did Americans grant an interview? That's serious, isn't it? Okay, so that interview was granted to our friend Kojo Yankson, who I think did an excellent job of that interview. We will show you portions of it. We'll start by showing you the part where the lady that is interviewed, the head of public affairs, you find her name, is indicating why she's doing the interview. She says that she's doing the interview because she wants to give the media the correct information because she thinks the media have been given information that is out of context. So she wants to give the media the correct information. She is at pains in this first part of the interview to say that she's not blaming anyone. We are not sure why she makes that case. And here we are doing a content analysis of the interview that the Americans granted Joy FM. She says that she's at pains to express that she's not blaming anyone. But she says she's doing it because she wants to sort of correct. She doesn't say that, but she wants to sort of correct the wrong impression. She says, I want to give you information to put you in context. Let's see the first part of the interview. Have a look.
So perhaps we'll start from the statement that the American government issued on Tuesday. And this statement referred to the decision made by the government of Ghana to cancel the PDS contract or terminate the PDS contract. And I would like to quote from it so we can start our conversation from there. It said, and I quote, "The United States of America notes this decision with regret. Based upon the conclusions of the independent forensic investigation, the U.S. position is that the transfer of operations, maintenance, and management of the Southern Distribution Network to the private concessionaire on March 1, 2019 was valid, and therefore the termination is unwarranted." So clearly the United States position on what to do about PDS was completely opposite to the Ghanaian government's position. How did the meeting end? The meeting last week in Washington, where the Ghanaian government sent a delegation to discuss this very matter with the MCC. How did that meeting end? And why does the statement say that the United States is noting this decision with regret? Was there a different conclusion at that meeting?
And we noticed that the media reporting, while you guys had some source documents that you were basing your reporting on, it lacked context. I think you were given, these source documents without background, and I just wanted to share some background with you, not to point blame, not to point any fingers or to place blame, but to give more background for you, for reporting purposes, and also to help explain a little bit to the Ghanaian public. So the source documents that I referred to were the letters that have been reported on in the media. And that was an internal bilateral work product. What I mean by that is that both sides came together for the past 13 weeks when this first became an issue back in July. MCC and the Ministry of Finance specifically were working diligently and very hard to make this concession an important part of the compact. And so they got together and they came up with...
Okay, so we will now show you the last part of the interview. And please take note, we are taking out the second part and we are going to show the last part of the interview. Now, in the last part, so you heard her. I don't know whether you could clearly hear what she was saying because of the very heavy American accent. Sometimes it's difficult to hear, but I'm sure that you did. She was talking about the fact that they had meetings and she's not blaming anyone and she's doing the interview because she wants to put the thing in context. Okay, so ultimately she's asked a fundamental question by Mr. Yankson. And the question is that the Ghanaians are saying that they are terminating this thing for some wrongdoing. The Ghanaians have found, I'll show you some emails tonight that indicate some of those wrongdoing. That the Ghanaians said they are terminating this for wrongdoing. Why is America against a termination for wrongdoing when they had a meeting with the Ghanaians and all of that? And that question was asked her at least 2 or 3 times. And somehow she doesn't give a direct answer. And she seems to be wobbling on that question a little bit. And she seems to suggest that the Americans took the decision because, according to them, the concession had already passed into the hands of PDS. That was quite worrying for me because the point she's making is that when the PDS and ECG signed the agreement, the concession passed to PDS. Once the concession passed, under no circumstance should the agreement be terminated. But when you do that, there's an agreement, you pass a concession, there's an agreement, duties, obligations, and responsibilities are not extinguished because the concession has passed, with the greatest of respect. The duties, obligations, and rights under a contract are not consideration or the concession has passed, that the ECG have actually transferred all the equipment to PDS, and so that's the end of the matter. That certainly is not the end of the matter. Those of you who went to University of Science and Technology or University of Ghana, or those of you who are there now, you remember that when you were filling the form to go to university, they would say that write your results in the form, and you write it down, and they believe what you say. And then you realize that they say that if at any time the university finds out that the information that you have given is not correct, they will withdraw you from the university. Sometimes they will prosecute you as well. In fact, some people have been prosecuted for that offense. So to my simple mind and that experience that I had, I thought it was very easy for the Americans to identify that irrespective of the fact that the concession may have passed, this is a situation where obligations have been violated, and those obligations that have been breached do have a consequential remark in the contract. So the contract will say that if you breach the obligations, the consequences thereof are as follows. And one of those consequences, clearly in the contract, is a termination. Why the Americans are worried about this, I'm not so sure. Let's hear what she says in answer to that question, the third part of the Joy FM interview.
So when the American government received the letter from the finance minister saying, we're going to go another way, and it stated its reason, which was that the guarantee had been found not to be valid. Was that not a good enough reason to cancel the PDS contract? Why did the Americans not agree?
That was the reason that the Ghanaian government gave. We, as the U.S. government, believe that the concession was valid and that the transfer was valid on March 1st, 2019. We find that the independent forensic audit found that that transfer was valid. So we stuck with that take on the matter.
Even the company that is supposed to provide the guarantee said, we're not providing a guarantee. The Americans still felt that there was a guarantee?
Well, we believe that the independent forensic audit that was done stated that that guarantee was valid and that there was no, that the concession was valid, the concession was valid. So we chose to go with what the independent audit, we determined that the independent audit said, and that we wanted to move forward with this very important concession.
So from the American perspective, so the company providing the guarantee says we're not providing it. The American MCC sees the concession to still be valid even without a guarantee.
Well, you're working on the assumption that there was no guarantee. What I'm saying is that the independent forensic audit stated that the transfer was valid March 1st, 2019. So that's what the U.S. government believes.
The U.S. government has the belief that there was a guarantee.
That there was a valid transfer, correct.
Which would mean that there was, correct, there was a guarantee, okay.
So that's why we noted with regret when the government of Ghana decided to go the way that it went.
Can you help me understand that? How does the American government see that there was still a guarantee even though the company to provide it said, we're not providing it?
So in these past 13 weeks, there was an independent forensic audit, and they were set out to figure out what went right, what went wrong with the transfer. And the way that we read the report that came out after that independent audit was that in the end, there was no reason to forsake the concession. There was a reason to stick with the concession because, in fact, the transfer was valid at the time of the transfer. So that's the position of the U.S. government. Of course, as I say, we note with regret the government of Ghana's decision, but you know, government of Ghana is a sovereign nation. They are entitled to make the decision that they made. And you know, we note it and we're ready to move on and continue to work with the government of Ghana. Because as you know, the compact is twofold, right? There's one is the the infrastructure to benefit the energy sector, and the other was the concession. So the infrastructure was the $308 million, which we still have, which is no small chunk of change, right? That we're going to continue to work with the government of Ghana and through MEDA to make sure that we create a more reliable energy network here to benefit millions of Ghanaians. So we're still really poised to continue our work with the government of Ghana on that. So the only thing that's affected by the concession being terminated is that $190 million, which what I said in the beginning, the $190 million was for infrastructure that was state-owned, were going to be state-owned assets and not going to the concessionaire. That was contingent on a successful concession. And since the government of Ghana decided to cancel that concession, it was no longer successful. So we had to 90. But I did want to make it clear to the media and to the viewers that this is not the end of the compact. This was a termination of the concession, which is one part of the compact.
Okay, and we'll talk a bit more about what it means going forward in just a moment.
Sure.
Before that, though, you've mentioned that this document, the internal work product from the MCC, addressed to the finance minister, is actually a document that was drafted by the finance ministry and the MCC.
Correct. It was joint. A collaboration.
This is not what has been communicated by the government of Ghana. So can you prove this? Do you have evidence that the Finance Ministry worked with the MCC to draft this document?
What do you mean? Well, I'll have to refer you back to the government of Ghana. I'm not privy to what they said about how this letter came about.
Right.
I'm just giving
what I'm saying. Said they drafted it alongside or with the MCC. They have not said that. What they have said they in response to it.
That's not saying that they didn't work together.
I know this, but they didn't say they worked together. So I would like to ask where the evidence is. I mean, I don't see a signature on it of the Finance Minister.
Kojo, what you're saying is two different things.
Okay.
You're not saying that the government explicitly said they did not work on this pre-negotiated way forward. They never. You're not saying that they did not. You're saying that they did not refute that statement. That's what you're trying to say, but what you're really saying is that you have not heard from the government who drafted this document, because you weren't given context when you found this source document, correct?
And you are now giving us this context.
And now I'm
Can you show us what it is that will prove that indeed the government of Ghana actually drafted this with the MCC? Because what I see here is a document on an MCC letterhead. It has an address, so there's an addressee. The addressee is the minister. And then there's a signature at the end of it. It was signed by Kaya Kim. K. Kim, forgive me.
It's okay.
And that is the only signature on the document. So what I'm asking is, how do we go to our government and say, hang on, this document that you are responding to, you actually helped draft it?
Well, so again, I'm not here to point fingers or place blame. What I'm here to do is to give context to to give context to the document that you had without any explanation. So like in any negotiation, when you come to the table in two parties, there's a lot of discussions and there's a lot of collaboration. And in order to get everything down in writing, it's usually a document is put together.
Right.
When you're in a negotiation, oftentimes one party is not writing, right, the document that's to be signed. And in order for it to be finalized, you need both sides to sign it so you can move forward. So it's set in stone, it's in writing, okay? I am not here to prove to you that both parties were in the room to write this document, okay? I'm just giving you context and background on how these past 13 weeks have gone.
Okay.
So that it can put it into a more clear view for yourself as you do your reporting and for the public, the Ghanaian public. So like I said, it's normal for any negotiation for two sides to get together and create a document so that it can be set in stone.
Did you hear that? I have to congratulate our colleague Kojo Yankson for such a brilliant interview, for asking the toe-to-toe questions, for asking the relevant questions, and for putting the interviewee to strict proof of matters that were not fussy document that he had. Kojo Yankson was telling the lady that the document that you said the government of Ghana jointly put together, it has no signature from the government of Ghana people. And so we don't know whether to participate. And in fact, the government of Ghana says that document is exclusively an American government production. And you are telling us that the document is a joint production of the government of Ghana and the American government. The government of Ghana doesn't have any signature saying that. Then she says that when you go into a meeting room, some people are writing, some people are not writing. And so those who write, their signature comes up. Really? No. Anyway, whilst he was watching, a law lecturer in commercial law and a famous lawyer, Moses Fuamoinin, wants to make a comment, and we are delighted to have him to make a comment on this. Hello, Moses.
You're looking handsome.
I thank you very much, Moses. I'm taking after you, the older ones. What do you make of what you've just seen?
Well, Paul, first of all, good evening to all your listeners. I think the United States government, and I say the United States government advisedly, because the United States government, that's the Trump administration, I'm not too sure if they hear all these facts, will be very happy about the media here in Ghana, the MCC, and even the United States Embassy here. Because there's so many things that are muddled up. First of all, as you indicated, if an agreement is signed and the fundamentals go wrong, they know it. Every U.S. lawyer will know, basic training of law. If the fundamentals of a contract are wrong, the whole contract is over, especially if these are conditions precedent. And the securitization for a contract, that is, and you clearly explained it, we're giving over assets worth over 3 billion, 13 billion, whatever amount. The securitization was to ensure that in case there's failure, then the Ghanaian government. The provision of is originally a bank guarantee. It was lowered to an insurance guarantee. Even that, the Ghanaian government discovered, because in contracts of this nature, some of the covenants, that is the terms of agreement, even are continuing. And you gave a very good example of how you can get into the university, we believe your documents, but if we discover falsehoods, then we can withdraw you and sack you. This is so basic. So, and you had the independent auditor that we, appointed confirmed that the agreement was valid. Who appointed that independent valuer or examiner, whoever it was, or auditor? I think, and I was still, and I've said it a couple of days ago, I think the president, because it now is gone beyond the U.S. Embassy, it's gone beyond the MCC, because I'm hearing that the World Bank is even putting a hold on $500 million worth of projects in the energy sector because of what is happening. Because the Bretton Woods institutions want to cross-check whether, things are going right with the Ghana government. So it's getting serious. I think the president of this country should engage the Trump administration. He should write to the president of the United States. Because there's absolutely no way I can believe that the United States government, in the face of the evidence, and you say you got some emails that indicate from the Dubai, investigations that indicate that those who granted the insurance guarantee are saying we don't have the mandate. It can't happen. The whole thing has fallen into pieces. The U.S. government or the U.S. Embassy and MCC and media cannot say they can look in the face of the evidence and say, oh, some auditors are saying we should continue. It doesn't make sense to me. And indeed, it's U.S. law. That would be saying that the Ghanaian government should condone fraud or, an agreement that the basis of which does not exist. That's against United States law. And it would even be against the Millennium Challenge, Corporation's own statutes. Because, Paul, don't forget that this whole MCC idea was a new way of having U.S. development aid. After what had been done from the 60s on, the new policy under what President Bush enunciated in 2002 was that governments are given the compact because, one, they are ruling justly, two, there's economic freedom, and three, because they're investing in their people. So corruption was so fundamental. If a country is found to be corrupt, it doesn't matter whether you meet all the matrices, you'll be thrown out. So what is the United States government telling us now? That we can see the security backing an agreement of this nature being found to have not been in existence, and we should continue with it? That will fundamentally run counter to the whole MCC idea in terms of the law setting it up. So honestly, I think the president of this has gone beyond, diplomacy. That is the U.S. Embassy here. It's gone beyond MCC. I think the government, the president should engage the Trump administration directly, report the matter to the State Department, even there are congressional committees that supervise the MCC, so that there can be a congressional investigation into this matter. Because I don't get it. Something is gone wrong, Paul.
I see. That's very interesting. That's very, very interesting. I like the part that you think that the president should escalate this matter to the level of the American administration and that there should be a congressional investigation of what actually happened and why the Americans want to take away the Compact 2 from Ghana. Based on what you say, what Ghana has done should be the right thing, and it should be in keeping with the tenets of American legal systems, isn't it?
Precisely, Paul. And as I'm saying, there are implications flowing. Now, some of the Bretton Woods institutions are threatening to, hold back, project lending in the energy sector because of what the U.S. Embassy is saying. So these are serious matters. And I think the president, because that will undermine our budget. $500 million going off our budget is going to hit this budget that's going to be read on the 14th of November. Planning in respect of how this country is going to go in an election year. So let's not the government joke with this matter. I think the president should report the matter because it's not everything, and I'm going to repeat it, it's not everything done by the U.S. Embassy or the embassies around the world that is in consonance with, the current Republican government. Otherwise, look at the Ukrainian, the problem that's going on, the investigation, the so-called impeachment process is going on. It is the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine who's not testifying against Trump. So, it's not all ambassadors. It is not all U.S. officials sitting here that are working in tandem with the Trump administration or the Republican Party's, Republican government policies. So many things can happen. And I am saying at this stage, it's gone beyond, the embassy here, MCC, and MEDA, because all of them are culpable. The due diligence they should have done, we should have ensured that these matters never happen. They didn't do it. They're clearly negligent. A very simple congressional investigation into this matter will establish that all of them are culpable. Indeed, they can all run into lots of trouble. And that's why they were probably trying to twist the hand of the government to, pass on and say there were some discussions, we have to go on with it. This is more serious. I think it's gone beyond them, and I think the president should address it directly to the Trump administration because there are implications. Now, giving you an example of how the Bretton Woods institutions are threatening to withdraw project lending to us. And the EU might even look at these because these organizations work together, but they can't control the government of Ghana. And I believe the president will not stand for this sort of stuff.
Thank you very much, Moses. Thank you so much. And that's Moses Famweni now giving us a new dimension of the matter. He thinks that perhaps even the American officials here are not doing things in tandem with the American administration. He gives an example of the American ambassador in Ukraine testifying against President Trump in the current impeachment proceedings underway in the House of Representatives in America. He thinks that President Akufo-Addo's administration should escalate this matter right to the front of the American administration, and a congressional investigation must be triggered. And he thinks that if that is done, there will be people who will seem culpable in the matter. Well, let's show you these emails as we end the PDS discussion and talk about football in a minute. This is the email that sort of justifies some of the things that Moses Famweni has been saying. So this is an email written between Al Kut and the Deputy Attorney General in Ghana, the Honorable Godfrey Dame. And they wrote to him and say as follows. They'll put on the screen in a minute and then we can all see it. And this, you're seeing this for the first time. These are classified documents that are being declassified. Okay, so there you have it on your screen there. This is from ILC. Is that the second email of 25th October? No, the second document, please. 25th October. Okay, they'll put that on the screen in a minute. Not this one, the other one is coming soon. Yes, this particular one. So this is the one that I'm referring to. So have a look. Dear Godfrey, referring to Mr. Godfrey Dame, thanks for recommending Emmanuel. We will contact him soon. It says, on your other query, and this is important, look at the third line after thanks for recommending Emmanuel. It says, on your other query, yes, this one was also brokered by Joe Australia. So the history to this is that they had sent something to Godfrey Dame for him to clarify, and he was wondering whether involved in this one because they are at an arbitration. I'll put at an arbitration on this one. But look, it says that we have initiated a the criminal case against Al-Nouri in Qatar. This is Al-Nouri, the guy who represented Al-Quds in the whole situation, where Al-Quds is saying that they have nothing to do with this matter. They have actually proceeded to initiate a criminal case against Al-Nouri. It says, we are all set to file the criminal and civil case in Jordan against Joe Australia. They will also file a criminal case against Joe Australia in Jordan. It says, we have to book these guys. Let's stay in touch, it says. Okay, so the critical part is that there are proceedings against them, and they are also saying that they have initiated civil proceedings against Joe Australia and Al-Quds. So these criminal proceedings and the civil proceedings in arbitration may have implicated the government of Ghana if we had sustained the guarantee that came in. If the insurance guarantee that came in and Al-Quds had been sustained by the Ghanaians, as the Americans want us to do actually, government of Ghana would have been implicated. They have nothing to do with this, and they have initiated criminal proceedings against their former staff who seem to be involved in it. If we had not terminated the agreement based on this, we as government of Ghana, as the Office of the Attorney General, would have been implicated in the civil proceedings. Would have been saying that we are holding on to an insurance guarantee that they have nothing to do with and which was procured by fraud. That's what would have happened. And I don't know whether the Americans see that or maybe they don't see it, but really this was part of the letter and wrap this part up. So this is Godfrey Dami now writing to them. He wrote earlier, he says, thank you for your email. I'm happy to recommend, there's a name there that we took out, who represents the Republic of Ghana and a number of reputable clients in cases of this nature. His contact details are as follows. Now, after that list, he says that I have already discussed with him. He's waiting for your call. Now, he says, our Deputy Attorney General, was this transaction brokered by Joe Australia too? And the email goes on. So the first one I read to you was a reply to this one. This one is the first letter where Godfrey Dami, they're asking Godfrey Dami to make recommendations on the Ghanaian lawyer who is able to assist them. We can have Ghana as almost a witness to the matter. Ghana haven't actually terminated the insurance guarantee, because now Ghana has terminated. That builds to them as evidence in their case against Joe Australia and all of those other people who have executed fraudulent insurance guarantees using their staff and also their. If government of Ghana had not terminated, government of Ghana would have been parties to this action as second or third defendants. That's what the government's decision has taken us out of, and I'm not too sure why the Americans do not like this one. Okay, what's the time now? Oh, 30 minutes past 10, we're run out of time. Ibrahim Sani is joining us now. George Afriye told us something about his relationship with Kwesi Nyantakyi before then. Ibrahim Sani was also very close to Kwesi Nyantakyi. Let's have a look and listen, and then we'll come back. We would have been in the studio and then we'll continue the discussion. Here's George Afriye.
12 came. You did not have a good relationship with Kwesi Nyantakyi. He had fired you as his vice president and from the executive council. What accounted for this bad blood? You used to be very good before 2014.
I think personally, it was started with my intention to contest.
To challenge him for the job?
In actual fact, initially it wasn't to challenge him because I had traveled with Kwesi for the CAF elections, the election that brought Ahmad Ahmad to power, and Kwesi having been promised a first vice president, of which he got the position of first vice president. In one of our travels, he assured me that, George, me cry my breath. And the insult and things back at home, it's about time I bow out to allow a new person. And then right away I said, Mr. President, having followed your footsteps, having worked with you, having understand the system, I will be interested to do so. So when we get to Accra, let's discuss it and most stakeholders. It was fine. Everything was fine. Now, on the day of my...
So that there was a deal between you and Kwesi for him to go to the CAF and you become the GFA president. He was already there.
He's already there.
Okay.
And naturally...
But you were lobbying him that once he's exiting, you want to take over.
Naturally, who doesn't want to succeed his boss? Naturally. And apart from that, it's not just your boss. It's someone you've worked closely to make sure that he also ascend to certain heights in football. He's been a FIFA Executive Council member in those elections. I went with him. There was an...
To Zurich?
Of course. Since 2011, I started going to Zurich for FIFA congresses. And so it's a system, and he knows I'm also connected and close to the people that he knows. So it was just by natural to say that, boss, if you are living, why not?
Okay. Then what happened?
Yeah, but I think that leaders sometimes, this is the problem they have. You come back and you hear all sort of things. Because I heard, in one of those things, I heard Mr. Kofi Menu giving instances where, no, you cannot leave. If you leave, remember, Nana you have to stay, because if you leave, what if George doesn't endorse you in your next re-election and all that? I think it got into him. And he said, no, I'm not going again. And then I said...
You're blaming Kofi Menu for it?
No, say I just mentioned one. A lot more people.
Other people were encouraging him to stay.
I mean,
they were encouraging him to stay because his future progress with CAF depended on a nomination from the GFA.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And if you were the GFA president, they were wondering whether you would nominate him.
And I find it very ridiculous for anybody.
Sounds like a fallacy, because you would.
Come on, naturally.
Yeah, everyone would.
And you know, interestingly, Paul,
why would you nominate someone
else? It is not so easy.
Yeah.
I'm being very honest with you. It is not so easy to climb to that location, that position.
Absolutely.
It's not easy. And the people who were talking have not even followed Kwesi to know how he made it to there. So when they were talking like that, it's like,
yeah, but it's in your interest as GFA president to have your former GFA president as a CAF president.
And you see, you'll be sitting there and we'll come to you, you'll be revered and come, oh, boss. Yeah. This is what we want. Some of us
but
want.
it gives Ghana also a prominent position for the Black Stars and World Cup ambitions and all of that.
So I used to ask people that, yes, none of us wish what has happened to him has happened. But I want to ask them, his current situation, and if he has failed it, which one is better?
Yeah.
Which one?
People give number 12 a negative mark for this outcome. That as a result of number 12, Ghana has lost its FIFA position.
Yes.
Ghana has lost its CAF position.
Yeah.
And therefore, number 12 should be cast to the dustbin of him. Do you share that?
I mean, yes, me and Mr. Kwesi Nyantakyi had our differences, but I don't wish what has happened to him. Never.
Do you talk to him?
Something. No.
You don't talk to him?
No, I will tell you why. I made an effort right after number 12 through the wife, because I had a very good relationship with Auntie Christine. And then I said I wanted to visit. So I used that through Obri and said that ask whether there's a permission for me to come home. If they said come, why not? Obri said the atmosphere in the house is not conducive for you to come. So I cannot force myself into a house where I'm not welcome. And in any case...
But you have his number.
No, he
even
changed.
I have his number.
No, he changed. But you are saying new. I'm referring to when the issues happened first.
Yeah.
He changed the number and I didn't have the number.
Did you find the number to call
I'm just saying, I just told you what I did.
Okay, so I have his new number. If I gave it to you, would you call him?
Why not? I'll try.
Before Friday's election.
Well,
and then ask for his blessing.
I will try and call him, but not because of Friday.
Yeah.
No. I will want to call him to find out how he's doing and come and visit him if the chance is there. Why not?
Okay, welcome to my guest in the studio, Sadiq Adams and Ibrahim Sani Diarra. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming. Ibrahim, let me start with you. There's a story that you said you can't be GFA. They can pay you. Did you say that?
No.
You didn't say that?
Yes, it was a headline, a cynical headline, cynically written for special effect. I didn't say that. Yesterday I was having an interview, too many interviews, people contacting me, and we're talking about, what sort of staffing the GFA should have. If the GFA wants to be like a blue chip company, we should be able to attract top brains. And the current salary structure won't permit the GFA to be able to recruit top talents to work within it. For instance, if the GFA wants to recruit you as the CEO, the current salary, the current salary structure will not be pleasurable to you.
Well, but if I look at it as a national service at this time of the football administration's life, I probably would do it.
Yes, some people will do it. I did it. I did it. I left a very good paying job. I came for something that even my own business, I paid my staff more than the GFA paid me. So it was a headline completely taken out of context.
Oh, I see. Okay, I understand that. Let's come back to the video we just saw. Do you think that Kwesi Nyantakyi and his influence, and the influence of those of you who were with Nyantakyi, had a role to play in the room? Maybe not about yourself, because we don't want you to talk about yourself, but in that room during the negotiations, and Sadiq knows the true answer, so if you don't give us the right answer, he will give us the right answer. He knows. In that room, first round voting out, second round concession was the Kwesi Nyantakyi effect in the room. Here is a man who has been an eternal GFA president from 2005, and we are talking 2019. He's been to CAF and FIFA, and he had quite a good cabal. I mean, I was a good friend of Kwesi, and many other people in the room were. Did you feel the effect that Kwesi Nyantakyi's influence is going to swing this thing up this man?
I can say one thing for sure, and that is that Kwesi created a very good relationship with people in football. So a lot of people, obviously, would want to ask him.
Should they vote?
Where should they vote?
I see.
People would want to know.
What his preference is?
Yes. I will go back to George's interview. You realize when George went to the chief imam, his talk was consistently that I want to continue with Kwesi Nyantakyi's legacy. He mentioned Kwesi Nyantakyi's legacy more than 10 times in about the 30 minutes he spent at the chief imam's place. And that tells you something. If the football people hear that you have the backing of somebody who's been successful in the industry, surely it could maybe sway one or two votes.
Did it happen on Friday? Did Kwesi Nyantakyi's influence come in the second round?
I don't know. I don't know. I was not until whether.
Is it true that his candidate was Palmer and Palmer was disqualified? And that Kwesi's candidate was Palmer. Apparently, he had been seen. Kwesi had been seen with Palmer in Sunyani and other places.
No. Kwesi had gone to visit the Domahini.
Okay.
He's a very, very good friend of the Domahini. Actually, not actually on even football matters. He had gone there in the company of some few football friends since number 12 came, Domahini came home to visit him.
I see.
So he had been in Kumasi and was journeying through and thought it wise that he should go and visit the man. So a hoo-ha was created around it. But I won't be surprised if people...
Was Palmer in Kwesi's company in this visit to Domahini? No, he wasn't.
No,
okay.
No. He was just in the company of Thunder and Blue Blue.
Oh, Blue Blue was mentioned in that interview.
Yes, it's a very close friend of
Kwesi. What's his real name? Kofi Menu. Kofi Menu. Because George Free accused Kofi Menu of being one of those who trumpeted Kwesi's continuity at the seat of the GFA that has brought all of us the problems that we have. Ask him that, are you blaming Kofi Menu for it?
I think maybe it's a bit far-fetched from George. Things that I know, some I'll reserve for when I write a book.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Then they must be very deep.
There are lots of things.
That we can't hear now.
Yes. It's important that we let the dust settle. When the dust settles and I have some time, I'll put together some books on some of these things and football politics.
I see. To talk about Kets, but what did you think as a journalist observing, I mean, approaching the event, everyone was wondering, where does Kwesi stand? Is he going to have an influence here? And the journalists were reporting privately to me that the negotiations seem to have Kwesi's colors in it, and it looks like George is going to lose because it appears his hand is taking the votes away from George, and it doesn't really matter where the votes conclude, but it looks like Kwesi is against George. That if George had fixed his relationship with Kwesi Nyantakyi, he would have won a landslide victory. Did you get that sense as well?
But that was very obvious. I met other platforms, and it will be very, very, I mean, it will really take only ignorant people to underrate or to say, de-emphasize the influence of Kwesi Nyantakyi in this election.
Talking about George Free and his ambition and his 40 to 43, still running short under category. Is it that if he had fixed his relationship with Kwesi Nyantakyi all the way before the Congress? And that's what I tried to get from him from that interview.
I'm not even sure anybody would have contested George if he had fixed his relationship with Kwesi Nyantakyi, because they know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, you can go as far as that.
Of course.
That you can say George had fixed his relationship, he won it.
Of course. And Keto Kreku, Palmer, and all the Bonsam, who was determined, even when Kwesi was in power in 2017,
to challenge.
It would have contested George Afriyie if Kwesi anointed him to contest the position. And they know, because they have mentioned publicly that, especially for Kurt Okraku, he was never going to contest Mr. Nyantakyi until he had decided to step down. And this was something mentioned by 4 or 5 of the people who were tipped to replace Kwesi. And they mentioned that until Kwesi had decided to step down, so he decided to anoint George and call them into a meeting to support him. No other person was going to utter a word. So
this was George Afriyie's to lose.
It was his position to lose, and he knew it. He had meetings with Kwesi on their. He mentioned in the interview on their flight to Zurich and to Cairo when Kwesi was contesting for the CAF and FIFA positions respectively, and he knew that Kwesi Nyantakyi was going to FIFA and the position will come back to him. And so when Kwesi decided to continue and got the endorsement of some key and big wigs of men in football, George knew that it's time, because if Kwesi leaves at a time that George will perhaps think that wouldn't be an opportune time for him to come to power, then he would have missed the train. So he wanted the position. Immediately Kwesi got to FIFA. That was where the disagreement started. But I think that...
So Kurt Okraku's outcome is an outcome by default?
To me, yes.
Okay, so if you take the votes take the votes that he won and the votes that he didn't win, is the one that he didn't win more?
Of course.
Oh, it's more?
He lost more votes
than he won.
The first round. Than he won.
I'm talking about the first
round. But the point is that those votes were going in another direction. Kurt was a very good candidate. He ran a very strategic campaign. He kept quiet and kept his chest. Unlike George, they were two contrasting candidates in this election.
George was confident that he was going to win.
He was very confident that he was going to win. And I thought that I did polls before the elections, and I knew that George, the numbers that he had mentioned, he was not even close to them, because clearly there were people who had endorsed him but were going to vote in a different direction.
Like Asante Kotoko?
Like Asante Kotoko.
Did they vote in a different direction?
Well, the candidate who was supposed to vote for George Afriyie was taken, who was supposed to vote for the another candidate instead of George Afriyie was taken off, because the CEO of Kotoko had come out publicly to endorse George Afriyie.
This is George Amwako.
George Amwako. Hours later, he was caught on tape. Revealing why he won't vote for George Afriyie, but he had come public. So
I see. That's interesting.
The dynamics were different. He had
so George Afriyie did not get the Kotoko vote. You don't think he got it?
The person who would have voted against George Afriyie in Kotoko was stripped of his voting rights. You understand?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But he was supposed to lose that vote. So he had, until he was caught on tape. George Amwako was caught on tape, revealing why he wouldn't vote for George Afriyie.
I see.
Yeah, he would have thought that he had to vote from Kotoko. And if you look at the pattern of voting from the Premier League clubs,
he said so. He said
from the Premier League,
because they had more votes.
No, there were 48 votes from the Division 1.
Oh, Division 1 is more than Premier?
Yes, the Premier had 32 votes.
48 clubs from Division 1, but the Premier teams get 2 votes. So 32.
32. And 48 from Division
So Premier
1.
is 16.
Yes.
So they have 32 votes, even though they get 2.
Yes.
Of course.
Division 1 gets 1.
But
that's 48.
48 clubs.
Also, Division 1 has more.
More. Yeah. And George Afriyie's votes came from Eastern region, where there are no many.
Not many clubs.
Many count from there.
What about Hearts of Folk? Question: how did Hearts of Folk fail to get into the executive council, and who did they vote for?
They shot themselves in the foot for Hearts of Folk. There were a lot of erratic decisions. They were very reckless in selecting who to rep them on the ESCO, because the chief executive officer, who would have in this shape, like George Amwako, was stripped of his voting right because he had endorsed Madam Amanda Clinton, the will of the board of the club.
Who is the chief executive officer?
Frederick Moore.
Oh, Frederick Moore had endorsed Amanda Clinton.
And
Hearts of Folk were not
he had
happy with
even
it.
signed her forms for her when the board of directors of the club decided that he has no powers.
Who did the board want the Hearts of Folk vote to go to Kurt Okraku?
No, they did not want to declare that publicly. That was the decision.
But Tokwe Afede is Hearts of Folk boss.
He's a Hearts of Folk.
He's close to Kurt. So and Kurt mentioned his name when I interviewed him.
Yeah.
So I suspect that he wanted Oh, I see. So he got punished. More got punished for supporting my girl.
Of course.
I supported Amanda Clinton, so I don't have a vote, but
I knew before the election that she wouldn't get a single vote, and because she was not voting herself, and how many?
Yeah, so incongruous that she didn't have a vote.
Yeah.
Maybe next time the fact that she passed the vetting should have guaranteed her a single vote
you need to be a
for
member
herself.
of the association.
Yeah, but the statute should be amended that if you're not a member, you pass the vetting.
If you amend the statutes and get 50 people to contest and they all have votes, you swing it in a direction that people who do not have clubs get more representation. You understand? They become much more delegate than the clubs.
Yeah,
so I think
we should
that
keep it as it is.
even the decision to expunge that section where you need to be a member of that to contest, that were expunged later on after Congress was not a good decision.
People liked it. I mean, people now have the hope that 4 years from now they can come in if they prepare.
But
what about Fred Papo? What accounted for his abysmal? Maybe Rahim, you first.
Yeah.
For Fred Papo, it's been part and parcel of 2005.
Yeah.
And he was in there, and